Welcome to my channel, detailing events throughout the decades. 1996. Port Arthur Massacre. Martin Bryant was a 28-year-old, living in Newtown, which is a suburb of Hobart. He was intellectually disabled, and had a history of erratic behavior. He was the firstborn of Maurice and Carleen Bryant. In 1987, he became a handyman for Helen Harvey, an heiress to the Tattersall gambling fortune. The two quickly became good friends, with Bryant eventually moving in with her. In 1992, Helen tragically died in a car accident, where Martin was severely injured. There was a lot of speculation that Martin was responsible for the accident, as he had been known to grab at the wheel when she was driving. However, he denied this at the time. Helen left her estate to Martin, who started to travel around the world with his new wealth from 1993 onwards. He also became interested in firearms, which he began collecting. Martin's father had tried to purchase a guest house known as Seascape, but the Martins brought this before Maurice could get his finances in order. His father was said to be very disappointed, and often complained to Martin about the shady way the Martins had purchased the property, claiming that double dealing had been going on. Martin started to believe that the Martins had deliberately brought the property to hurt his family, and believed this was the cause of his father's depression. In 1993, Martin's father committed suicide, which deeply affected Martin. He blamed the Martins for his father's depression and suicide. It was on April 28, 1996, that Martin Bryant drove to Seascape Guest House, where he killed the Martins, and took the keys to the property, before driving onto the historic site of Port Arthur. Port Arthur was a former prison colony, that had been transformed into a popular tourist attraction. It attracted many people each year. Martin Bryant arrived at the Port Arthur entrance at it is thought around 1:10 p.m., where he went to park his car. From there, he went into the Broad Arrow Cafe and had something to eat and drink. After he had finished, it is reported that he pulled out a semi-automatic rifle and began shooting at those inside the cafe. The cafe wasn't very big, and tables were close together. Confusion followed inside the cafe, as people now began to realize what was happening. Bryant was near to the exit, which prevented people from escaping. After he finished shooting in the cafe, he moved towards the gift shop area, where again he began shooting at people inside. He left the building and headed towards the car parking area, where a number of coaches and people were parked. In the confusion, many people believed that a historic reenactment was taking place. Many people moved in closer for a better look, and were confronted with Bryant as he open-fired at those in the car parking area. He then left the car park and headed along Jetty Road towards the toll booth, where many people were now running to get away. In front of him was Nanette Meacock and her two children running for cover. Witnesses report that he drove slowly up to them and opened the door. It is believed that Nanette thought that the person in the car was there to help her to safety, but he stopped and got out of the car, where he shot and killed Nanette. He then went after her children. Tragically, all three were killed by Bryant. As he got to the toll booth, where there were several cars waiting, he blocked a 1980s BMW. The occupants of the car were all shot and killed. On seeing what had just happened, cars quickly reversed back up the road to safety. He got into the BMW, leaving behind his yellow Volvo, and headed towards a service station, where he cut off a white Toyota Corolla which was trying to leave the service station. Inside the car was Glenn Pears and his girlfriend Zoe Hall. He tried to pull Zoe out of the car, but Glenn got out of the car to confront Bryant. He pointed the gun at Glenn and locked him in the boot of the BMW. He then went around and killed Zoe as she tried to escape. He drove back to Seascape Guest House with Glenn Pears still locked in the boot of the car. Along the way, he continued to shoot at cars and people, until he reached Seascape, where he removed Glenn and reportedly handcuffed him to the stair rail inside the property. At some point, he set the BMW on fire. Police now surrounded the guest house and tried to negotiate with Bryant to surrender himself and the hostage, but this failed. Back at the historic Port Arthur, the wounded were quickly taken to hospital. Bryant had left a trail of dead and wounded people after the shooting, and those who had managed to escape were left in complete shock at what they had witnessed. On the morning of April 29, Bryant, still inside the Seascape guest house, decided to set the property on fire. He fled the building, with burns which he had gotten in the fire, and was apprehended. Investigators went inside the burnt-out building and discovered the bodies of 3 people. It is reported that during his detainment, Bryant kept asking how many people he had killed, and seemed to be impressed by the number of dead. In total, 35 people died that day, with many others being wounded. The Port Arthur tourist site reopened a few weeks later, and a new restaurant was built. The former Broad Arrow Cafe is now a place to quietly reflect. A monument and memorial garden is dedicated to the victims and was opened in 2000. Less than a month after the massacre, the National Firearms Agreement was introduced. It included a 28-day waiting period for all gun sales, as well as banning all fully automatic and semi-automatic weapons, unless buyers could provide a valid reason for owning them. A gun buyback scheme was also introduced, which saw the surrender of around 700,000 firearms. The reason why Martin Bryant went to Port Arthur that day remains undetermined, but it is widely believed that his motivation came from the Dunblane school shooting in Scotland, England. In 1996, Martin Bryant pled guilty, and received 35 life terms, without the possibility of parole. While awaiting his trial, a court-appointed psychiatrist gave the opinion that Bryant showed signs of having conduct disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and Asperger's syndrome. Since 2015, he is imprisoned at the Riston prison complex. While in prison, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. This massacre shocked Australia, and has gone down as the most notable massacres in Australia's history. Forever remembering those 35 people who died that day. May you always be remembered. Thank you for watching and learning about events through history. Please subscribe to my channel to view other events throughout the decades.